here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Am I fired up this Saturday? Oh, you bet I'm fired up this Saturday, because we learned today that the spy balloon that was shot down, I believe, over the Atlantic Ocean as it was veering, floating along in South Carolina, was shot down finally. But that should not be the big storyline today, because here is breaking news audio from President Biden to listen to on Alex Garrett Podcast Network right now.
Briefed on the balloon. I ordered the Pentagon to shoot it down on Wednesday as soon as possible. They decided, without doing damage to anyone on the ground, they decided that the best time to do that was as it got over water outside within the 12-mile limit. They successfully took it down, and I want to compliment our aviators who did it, and we'll have more to report on this a little later.
All right, okay. But my problem is we had a delayed reaction again. At least it seems like we did. Because when you don't let the American public know for about a week that these spy balloons were literally flying into U.S. airspace, then you, again, are doing what you did during COVID, which is, let's not tell anybody till maybe the first case happens, maybe the first death happens, maybe the first tragedy with COVID happens. Then we'll have to tell people. There was no way to stop COVID, and there was no way to obviously tell the people that there was no way to stop these balloons from floating into Montana. So why not just alert the public so that Montanans in Billings are not thrown off by this huge looking, balloon, this foreign object in our airspace. I was thinking about this today. In New York City, we never let that happen. You know why? We have helicopters circling around the Hudson River, circling around the East River, to make sure our airspace is fine. And I don't understand why it took a week. You could say, well, they just wanted to do this without the public knowing, but yet the public got freaked out. And politically, you couldn't have it hanging there regardless. It would look terrible for the Biden administration. But now the fact they sat on this for a week, that's disturbing too. How about the fact that it was, who knows what the intelligence of China was getting while having this balloon over our Air Force bases or our naval, or, our military bases. But see, the other thing, and I was reminded by this working the Joe Piscopo show this week on Thursday, Friday. We've had a spy infiltrate us. The spy that shagged Eric Swalwell. And of course, I think Dianne Feinstein's driver had some connection to the Chinese government. There are ties to spies everywhere. But now the public is actually seeing it, and that's the freaky part. But they've always been there. And the question is, why? This reminds me, Obama didn't want to go into the Waldorf Hotel Astoria in 2008 or 2012, his final trip to the UN, because he thought the Chinese were tapping into the Waldorf when they bought the hotel to do whatever with it. I hope it looks good, but it's owned by a Chinese developer, and maybe the person's a good developer, but if they're ties to the Chinese government, then that's not good. You know what I mean? And so what we learned today is that the U.S. is having another delayed reaction. And that first delayed reaction to China, maybe accidentally, maybe purposely, letting a Wuhan lab leak of COVID, it was unleashed into the world. And senators were selling off stocks. The president, Trump, was actually sending back personnel from the State Department under cover of night. But in the public eye, we didn't know much about it until a month later. And that cost us time. And then here's the other part of all this, which nobody has talked about. Okay, it's a national security issue that we didn't stop China's balloon from entering our airspace. Absolutely. But what about the fact that, let's face it, a lot of these people in Washington, the bureaucrats, have ties to China. Maybe the fact that the Biden administration has ties to China. Do they not? Business dealings, it seems like, to China. That can be really the big reason why they're afraid of China. Is because they have business dealings going on over there. And no one wants to talk about it. But we have to. Because even the NBA has ties to China. The NBA. Even the BBC, 2021, Hunter Biden, what was he doing in China and Ukraine? We have all these different things that seems to be pointing to the fact that we, and I'll just say this. COVID, the news was breaking of COVID and the unleashing of it, as they were supposed to do a trade deal with China under the Trump administration. But China, dropped out of that trade deal phase, if you remember. Then weeks later, COVID's hitting our shores. So they are pissed at us. And they want to dominate not just us, but I think the world. And I would be hard-pressed to believe America's going to let that happen. But the fact that this was delayed a week in knowing is stunning. The fact that it took a Billings newspaper to break this story is stunning. But that's why the free press matters, because they can inform us of things that the government doesn't want us to know. I think the fact that any Kennedy assassination file has been released is a miracle at this point. That's how secretive it's becoming. By the way, after this podcast, if I tell you there's a spy balloon over my house, I will let you know that on the Alex Garrett Podcast Network. Because I know that this is not the easiest thing for anybody to hear. Because we don't want to believe the government lies to us, or hides things from us. But a huge dose of reality when Bloomberg reported that today. To the point where I think they had to shoot this thing down today, as the news was reeling from that. March 30, 2022, Washington Post. Inside Hunter Biden's multi-million-dollar deal with a Chinese energy company. Proof in the pudding that this administration's son and this administration has business ties. The Washington Post is reporting on this. So we are not only afraid, and I believe we can strike China at any moment if they decide to do anything stupider, when they say, well, we have now a right to escalate more, basically is what they said today. But in my view, the admin was forced to do something or they weren't going to. Who knows if any data was picked up from its trek from Alaska over to the Carolinas, coast to coast. Thanks to a quote-unquote wind problem? No, I don't believe that's a wind issue that takes a spy balloon from Alaska to North Carolina. That's intentional. But the fact that the Biden name is compromised with China, I think the Trump name is too, back then. It's just another reason why you and I should look out for each other. Because clearly we know who is looking out for who in Washington. And it sure as hell is not the American people. Because anybody who would get word that a spy balloon on January 28th was was showing up on U.S. airspace, you would have tried and cut that down earlier, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? It's okay to ask questions. And believe me, the fact that we shot it down is not enough. There's going to be questions about this. There's better be hearings about this. There's got to be something to follow up. It can't just be, woohoo, we shot it down. Great. It's a win. There's got to be another step to this process. And that process is going to be grilling Blinken, grilling the Biden administration, grilling, I guess, General Milley, grilling, I don't know, pick a name, just getting answers, specifically to those that knew what they knew a week ago and didn't want to tell the public. Because it should trigger you, because this is how COVID started. Nobody wanted to talk about it. The senator sold the stock. The senator sold stock before news of COVID broke. Trust me, it appears now that Washington knows more than we do. And we're the American people that elect them. So shouldn't they have an obligation to serve us and let us know what they know at any given moment? Well, I would hope so. I would hope so. And as far as solutions, this is why I didn't really... Yesterday, there was no solution to it because I thought shooting it down would be an escalation. And unfortunately, China thinks that too. Now, you couldn't really keep it hovering over space, so why not just try and do what you can to escort it out of airspace? That would have been the thing to do. But now that it's shot down, we have to have more solutions to this so that our American people are not spied on in this way again. Then again, our phones are spying us anyway. I mean, there are so many things that are spying on us anyway. We just physically see it and we freak out. Because it's not a phone company in freaking Silicon Valley. This is China we're talking about. An enemy of the state. An enemy of the state. That's what they are. And there's no business dealing that can eradicate that truth. And we have to defend our homeland. Not just shoot down a spy balloon, but find solutions so that we don't ever see this again and never see China spying on us again like this. Or Russia for that matter. And then here's the other thing about this timeline. So, if you piece this all together, it starts to make sense. U.S. finds out that this balloon has entered the airspace. They actually start shoring up bases around the Philippines. Did you hear about that? They've made an agreement to sort of be in the Philippines military bases, shoring up around China. What do they know that we don't? They have to shore up around China. That we have to shore up around China. Then the balloon happens. So obviously, we were reacting to that way before the public saw anything. And I do think Blinken should have been as useless as it could have been. Someone should have met with China and said, yo, what the hell is going on? Tell us why you are doing this. And at least maybe not even ask them, just said, cut it out, knock it off, or you will pay the price for that. I'd like to see China be paying a price for this. Wouldn't you? Email me, alex@alexnyc.com. That's the solution. We have to make them pay a price for spying on us and showing them that putting a freaking spy balloon in our airspace is unacceptable. Not just by shooting it down, but by further action before they continue to do whatever they're going to do and we be 10 steps behind them because we're so afraid of them. Can't be afraid. Got to make them pay. And most importantly, you got to find a way to make sure that never happens again. Because it could be a worse outcome next time. And we don't want that. But, shoot me an email, alex@alexnyc.com. Shoot me a text on my text me line at 206-426-9884. That's 206-426-9884. Wouldn't you like to see China pay for this? Spying on American people? Blatantly spying? I think I would. And I think you would too. But shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Let's converse. Let's talk on the Alex Garrett Podcast